During COVID, I thought it would be fun to get a job at a local haunted house attraction. My friend Marissa was already working there, and she told me they were looking for new actors and actresses. She pulled some strings and got me a job. After I met with the owner, I learned there were multiple sections to the haunted house attraction, including 3 haunted houses and the haunted corn maze. On my first day, there was some slight rehearsing of my character and just demonstrating my acting skills to one of the supervisors who was on duty. My role for the night was assigned to be a damsel in distress. This meant I was going to be tied to a pole and yelling at the guests to help me as they walked past me. Of course, all guests would be told before entering not to touch any of the actors or actresses, so they would know not to actually untie me when I'm screaming for help. Before opening time, the supervisor, SL coordinator Jeremiah, walked me to my post. Quite literally, my post, because I'd be tied to a wooden post in the corn maze. I was honestly surprised that I actually had to be tied up and not just pretend. I asked how I would go to the bathroom and such. He said there would be short breaks between sessions. He also said there would be another supervisor nearby if I should need anything, which made me feel a little better. Once he walked away, I was left alone. There were a bunch of sound effects and scary ambiance loops echoing through the cornfield from the various speakers hidden throughout the maze. Pretty soon, a little air horn sounded in the distance, indicating that the attraction was open. To get into character, I was nervous but excited. Since I was more so in the middle of the corn maze, it wasn't until a few minutes passed that the first guest would be passing me. I started to put on my best performance as a damsel in distress. I screamed and fake cried, begging everyone who passed for help, saying, "He's coming back soon!" on cue. Some people would play along and say things back, and I improvised responses in character. Everyone was wearing face masks because of COVID, so I couldn't see people's entire faces. Eventually, 2 male guests who looked to be in their 30s walked past, looking at me but not saying a word. One of them slowed down as he just shot me this gaze with his big eyes that quite honestly creeped me out. They kept walking and disappeared further into the maze. This was around the time I was starting to realize there would be long gaps between guests. Sometimes I could suddenly hear someone brushing through the crops nearby. I was wondering if it was a staff member. The guests weren't supposed to stray off the path. I turned completely around and saw 2 men emerging from the crops towards the pole I was tied to. The same 2 men from before. Something wasn't right. I broke character and said, "You guys can't stray off the path." Then one of them laughed under their mask, and the 2 men started speaking in some other language. I think Russian. Then one of them walked back to the path, but in the opposite direction that the guests are supposed to go. He just started standing there, keeping watch, it seemed, while the other one started to inappropriately grab me. I knew what was happening immediately, and I started screaming bloody murder, saying, "Help! This isn't part of the act!" I called out things like, "I'm being assaulted!" Moments later, one of the supervisors emerged, seeing if I was okay. By then, the 2 men had already run away. I was untied and escorted out of the maze. I called my parents, and they insisted I just leave right now. I left, and Jeremiah and one of the other supervisors said I'd be paid for the night. If I didn't want to come back, they'd understand, but to just keep them in the loop. I wish I could say it was over, though. On my ride home, I was extra cautious to make sure I wasn't being followed. I noticed halfway home that the same white car was behind me the whole time. I started making turns down random streets, and when the white car stayed behind me every single time, I knew I was being followed. I knew I had to find the nearest police precinct, so I typed in police station on Google Maps and started driving to it. They followed me the whole way until I pulled into the parking lot of the precinct. Then they kept driving. I never saw the car again. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before finally turning it back on and driving home, confirming every few seconds that I wasn't being followed. I didn't return to work at that haunted house attraction again.
Did you know if you hit that like button, there's a good chance someone else's spine will get tingled by these stories. This was the first and last time I ever went to a haunted house attraction. I live in Fort Worth, Texas, and every year there's this big haunted house attraction that opens up. A few of my friends wanted to go this year, and I figured it's time I finally experience a haunted house. For a little early context, I had a very troubled childhood that's caused me to develop PTSD, but I'll get more into that later. It was a weekend, so nobody wanted to go into this sober. My friend Noah hosted a little pregame for all of us. It was going to be 6 of us, my 3 guy friends and 2 of their girlfriends. We all smoked and drank in Noah's backyard, everyone thinking it would make the experience more fun. We bought our tickets for the attraction on their website while we were pre-gaming. I rarely ever smoke weed because it makes me kind of paranoid, but I guess tonight I wanted to try smoking again and see if I could overcome that barrier. Surprisingly, I felt good. I think the mix of alcohol and weed kind of canceled out the usual negative thoughts I would have from just smoking alone. Eventually, we called an Uber to the attraction, which was like 20 minutes away from Noah's house. There was a half-hour line. The place was pretty busy. We made friends with the people in line ahead of us. I was pretty cross-faded, honestly, but I wasn't gone. I remember just about everything that happened. When we got to the front, I started feeling a bit woozy, but I didn't say anything to my friends. We entered the haunted house, and from the start, there was a lot of screaming and intensity. The actors were really good, but intense, and it was starting to give me anxiety. I was starting to realize how not okay I was and how much of a mistake getting high was. One of the haunted house actors must have realized how scared and quiet I looked, and he chose to get in my face trying to scare me, yelling and making noises. I'm not gonna lie, I was starting to internally freak out, but I was trying to keep it together in front of my friends. This haunted house was going on for what felt like forever, and in my condition, every single jump scare made me almost pee my pants. All the flashing lights and fog really made this whole experience even more trippy and surreal. We came to this room lit up with an eerie red glow, with a bloodied man dressed as a guy in a suit and a top hat yelling at us, part of the act. But behind him, in the corner of the room, was a guy who wasn't dressed as anything. He was just standing there, looking at me, into my soul. And as I realized I was looking at the face of my father, I let out a scream straight from my stomach. Every hair on my body stood up. The room went silent. My friends looked at me, laughing at first, thinking I was joking around. But when they saw I was serious, one of the girls grabbed me and asked what was going on. I said, "It's my dad." And I pointed to the corner where there was now no one standing. I remember all my friends and the actor being confused, and everyone could tell I was not messing around. My friends knew about my troubled past. "There's no one there," one of my friends said. The actor apparently asked my friends if I was okay. I was now in the middle of a full-on panic attack, yelling, "I want to leave, I want to leave." Noah left with me through a side exit, and he sat with me while our friends finished the attraction. It wasn't cheap, so I wasn't going to make them all come out with me. As we sat outside the place, Noah told me I shouldn't have smoked so much, as he tried to assure me that my dad wasn't in there, that I was just hallucinating. My father used to abuse my siblings and me. I'm the oldest, so I remember the most of it. He left us and our mom one day and never came back when I was 10. My close friends know about this to a certain extent, so I didn't have to explain to Noah. When our friends were done, they met us at a Wendy's nearby where I was just trying to eat to help calm me down. I was embarrassed, but my friends didn't judge, thankfully. Not to my face, at least. I went home earlier than everyone else. I didn't want to spoil their night. When I got home, I knocked out right away. I guess because of how drunk and high I was that night, I was having a nightmare about the scene at the haunted house and my father standing in the corner of the room. He was saying, "Wake up, Charlie." And I did wake up. I woke up in my dark room in the middle of the night to see my father towering over my bed, looking down at me with his eyes open super wide. He was literally this towering 9-foot-tall version of my father, bending down with his body contorting in an impossible way. When I saw it, it took me a few seconds to digest what I was looking at and scream straight from my stomach again. My mom came rushing in and turned on the lights, and the apparition was gone. My heart was racing, and my blood ran cold. I cried to my mom that I saw Dad. It was one of the most scarring nights of my adult life. I don't touch weed or any substances anymore besides light alcohol, and I'm never going to a haunted house attraction again after that. Thanks for listening. If you want to help build the True Chiller community, like, subscribe, and share.